this is my review for Panzer Paladin for the Nintendo Switch. I have a physical copy from Limited Run Games. I love it. It's great. It's made by Tribute Games, and you can tell that it is a tribute to games. It's designed in a pixel art 8-bit style. It's intended to be pixel art. It's intended to be 8-bit, not 16-bit. It doesn't have that full color depth. But what they do with 8-bit color is absolutely phenomenal. It probably couldn't be played on the NES because it probably requires a little bit better performance than that, but it's very smooth frame rate. It's a very, very responsive game. There's lots of different button combinations to things. It uses modern controls, but it's designed to look and feel like an 8-bit game. In fact, there are filters you could enable on the graphics, such as the CRT filter, and there's another CRT curved where it kind of flexes the screen a little bit and kind of curves the action into a fisheye to simulate that curved screen look. And it feels really good. There's even an option in the audio to set the audio down to 8-bit as well, and I gotta tell you, the sound is good. We'll get to that in a minute, but I want to talk about the graphics. Pixel art's good. It's pretty solid. It flows well, high frame rates, everything looks good, very colorful, very vibrant. I'm gonna give the graphics probably an 8.5. I really liked the graphics here in Panzer Paladin. Gameplay-wise, let's talk about gameplay. I played about half of the main mission. You get to pick your level. The levels don't have to go in order. You can pick any level after the first one. There's different territories. There's Canada, America, Mexico, Scotland, Greece. I really liked that all of the locations were actually themed kind of like that location. I played Japan, and it had the Japanese, pagoda-style buildings. It had very Japanese influenced architecture. I played the Mexico, and Mexico had like a very Aztec feel, as well as the boss was themed after that territory. Mexico had a skeleton that had an Aztec style or a Mayan style headdress. In Greece, your boss is Medusa. In Scotland, it is a dragon. In China, it's a lion. Everything it's very territorial, and it feels really good. The downside is the play is fairly repetitive. It gets kind of old after a while. It's kind of the same, mostly the same. The only big variant is the boss at the end, which is fairly easy to reach. But each boss has different mechanics, and you have to kind of play around and learn how to handle each boss. So, gameplay-wise, I'm going to go ahead and give Panzer Paladin an 8. I believe it deserves an 8 because I love this style of game. It's a Castlevania-esque game with kind of a Mega Man-style element where you're able to pick where you go in the world. The downside is you don't really pick up any sort of special abilities from each boss that you can then use on the next. You do get a weapon from him, but the weapons all have a durability limit, and the weapon isn't terribly special. It's cool, but it's not terribly special. Audio-wise, this is where the game really shines. I'm going to give the audio a 9 right off the bat. It's fantastic. The soundtrack is good. There's different themes for different areas. The themes aren't overly niche-y. Like, Mexico doesn't have like an overtly Mexican sound, and Japan doesn't have an overtly Japanese sound. It still maintains kind of a rock and guitars mode to it. It has really good melodies, fantastic sound. I kind of wish it had a little bit more variations, because like I said, they all kind of sounded similar, but they were all pretty solid. There is a mode in the options menu at the beginning of the game to change the sound from a full, sound to more of an 8-bit classic sound, and it kind of tones everything down to 8-bit, and the soundtrack sounds just as good. I would feel like it's composed intentionally that way. So it sounds really good, and it feels really good. I'm going to give the sound a 9. Story-wise, this is where the game kind of loses it. I'm going to give the story a 5. It's kind of a weak story. The premise is these swords, weapons, rain down from the sky from outer space, I guess, and each sword is a portal for enemy soldiers to come through and invade. and each sword is you kill enemies, you take their swords, and you can kill minor enemies and take minor swords, and then you kill the boss and you take his big sword. You can then melt these swords down to increase the health of your mech. You have a mech, and you have a pilot mode as well. But like I said, other than it just kind of like very repetitive, very similar. You had to go around the world and destroy all 11 sites, and I would assume that there's a 12th boss after that. I just didn't get to play it. But overall, that brings the average of Panzer Paladin for Nintendo Switch to a 7.625. I love my physical copy. I wouldn't trade it, but I definitely think it's probably worth a pick up on digital. Sometimes it goes on sale for about $10 in the eShop. I believe its list price is $15.99, or $14.99, $15. Definitely worth picking up if you're a fan of Castlevania and Metroid games. You know, that 8-bit nostalgia. But overall, probably not worth more than 10 for me. I think I would pick it up digital. But I do have a physical copy, and I like the physical copy. It gives me a lot of hope for Tribute's next games.